And I guess 2021, we shouldn't be surprised that we're starting these final 2 sitting weeks this year in sort of a bit of a challenging environment, as we've experienced for most of the past 20 months or so. So we probably all shouldn't be too overly surprised, but I do think this week we may be reaching a new level of the bizarre. After question time today, I feel Senator Wong may actually need to sit down with their own Senate team and ascertain where they actually are on vaccines. We had Senator O'Neill criticising no jab, no play, like the best of the anti-vaxxers, clearly wanting to open our children to a virus that we're more than capable of vaccinating against. But she was then followed by Senator McAllister, who was critical that the PM had suggested people in Brisbane should be able to get a coffee at 80% vax rate, putting baristas at risk, smacking of demands for mandatory vaccination. And then, of course, we saw the bill this morning by Senator Hanson attempting to fundamentally halt government legislation. Seriously? What sort of ejaculation of the pacifier is this? I would hope that one thing we can all agree on is national security, the importance of keeping our nation safe. But yet, here we are, faced with a revolt as we see a bill that will boost our national security, secure critical infrastructure to prevent cyber attacks, and this is the first piece of legislation that's come before us today. So I stand here in disappointment that our national security, all of our security, might be jeopardised due to this sort of behaviour. So when we began the COVID journey, National Cabinet was established to ensure that the whole country was working in the same direction when it came to living in a post-pandemic world. A national plan was developed, working with expert advice from the Doherty Institute and Commonwealth Treasury. The Morrison government has always been and continues to be committed to the national plan. And that plan is working where it is upheld. Thresholds were set, jurisdictions could open safely, both at the 70% and the 80% fully vaccinated marks. Now, I appreciate we've seen some states adhere to the plan and others go a little rogue. And if I was looking cynically at the behaviour of Senator Hanson's home state premier along with WA's, you may think they could be working in cahoots to cause political problems for the Prime Minister in the lead-up to the federal election. And this is important for everyone to remember. It's the state premiers, far too often along with unelected health officers, determining these restrictions. And to anyone who looks across the different states, for anyone who assumes that some of these restrictions are based in science is ludicrous. Arbitrary numbers in homes allowed, random distances people can travel, masks both inside and out, let alone by yourself in a car, drinking, sitting down versus standing up. But what we do know, despite what the COVID doomsayers predicted, when New South Wales opened it up at its high level of vaccination, cases have continued to decline. Perhaps more importantly, hospitalisations and those requiring ventilators, those numbers have also consistently dropped. This is important to remember because despite the voodoo science, the sheep-drenched pushes, we are seeing vaccinations at work. They are effective at ensuring the virus has minimum health impacts. They're keeping people safe. As we see those who are vaccinated, even if they are COVID positive, they're not really getting as sick, nor are they passing on as widely as their viral load is much lower. So high vaccination rates combined with sensible public health strategies, we're seeing a virus we can learn to live with, not one that's incredibly deadly for many Australians. Now, I do understand that everyone in the Australian population pretty much across the board is over it. They want government out of their life. They want things to get back to normal. I actually think we would struggle to find too many people who would want us to continue living in the same way that we have been. We all want to see kids back in the classroom, our teenagers and young people to experience all we did when we were young, for families to be able to get together, for businesses to be able to operate as they best see fit. And in fact, as of yesterday, every single state has reached over 80% first dose, and in fact all are over 70% fully vaxxed. So it is time for restrictions to be rolled back. And this is something every Premier has agreed to in National Cabinet. All of them unanimously agreed to in National Cabinet. The performance art that's being conducted by some state premiers clinging to relevance, or even more concerning, those with hospital systems already overwhelmed without a COVID case at all, are now working actively against the plan they agreed to. But we do also need to remember that at no point has the Morrison government mandated vaccines. We've always said that it's up to the individual. And whilst we've never hidden our desire to see as many Australians as possible to get vaccinated, we've never demanded they be compulsory across the board. There are, of course, exceptions, those in certain aged care and health settings, but this also is not anything new. This is something that has occurred previously around the flu vaccine. And we want to protect and continue to protect those vulnerable communities and keep those and those that work with them safe. And I think, as Senator Lambie actually so perfectly put it together this morning, mandatory flu vaccines have been around since COVID was nothing but a sparkle in a bat's eye. The ability to mandate is driven by states, and while some states, such as my home state as New South Wales, has set a date where those who've decided against the vaccine will open up to them, it still will be only around 4 to 5% of people over 16, a very small majority of people who will not have received a first or second dose of vaccine. So once you get there to 15th of December for us, you will be free to do as you wish. And on top of that, those that have decided to remain unvaccinated will be able to access, should they require a health system funded by all taxpayers, should they require hospitalisation or a ventilator. We need to learn to live with COVID. It should be something similar to the flu, and it's the vaccines that can allow this to occur. So at that point, 95% fully vaccinated, I do think we should also see the end of QR codes and mask mandates. We need to return to a pre-COVID life. Freedoms should be returned without any restrictions. But many of these restrictions are being put in place under state health orders. And I note that some of the people who supported the bill this morning were also some of the strongest advocates in this place for states' rights and keen to ensure respect of the Constitution. Yet seemingly some were happy to overrule, override and, quite frankly, overreach across the states. So it's important to remember, for those in Queensland and WA in particular, elections have consequences. The overwhelming support given to both premiers in those states at recent elections has emboldened them to maintain unacceptable levels of restrictions, not based on science, effective health advice, quite frankly not even common sense. But the rest of the country should not be put at risk with this unacceptable behaviour and threats because a small percentage of the population can't get a coffee. As we've all come to know far too well, states and territories have a large degree of autonomy to conduct their own affairs under the Australian Constitution, the ability to implement public orders amongst them. There has been significant overreach by premiers, and I'm not denying that at all. I think the restriction of movement throughout this country has been extended beyond belief. I think it's a little crazy, in fact, that we're all sitting here set up in split seats, mask mandates in Canberra, the most highly vaccinated jurisdiction in the country, in fact one of almost in the world. I do think businesses should have the right to refuse entry or service to those who decide to remain unvaccinated, not those who have legitimate medical grounds, but those who oppose the vaccine as they don't support vaccines. I have zero tolerance for anti-vaxxers, and I've been dealing with them and a lot of those people for a lot longer than many others in this place. There's nothing like being the mother of a newly diagnosed son with autism to be told that I caused it. I gave it to him because I'd had him vaccinated. It's wrong, deceitful and incredibly upsetting. But these people have permeated autism groups for years, written articles and diverted more money away from autism research than anyone else. Also, we can debunk time and again the work of a struck-off and disgraced physician. I've spoken up against these people since coming to this place and have received the most vile abuse, including threats to myself and my family. These people are abhorrent, their views are ridiculous, and no weight should be given to them at all. We have such a high voluntary rate of vaccination. We should maintain the national plan to reopen, the easing of restrictions. We should have no mask mandates, no QR codes. We should have unrestricted quarantine-free travel across our country, and businesses should be able to operate in the way that they feel they are best able to do so. I want to see the end of COVID like so many other Australians. I want to be able to visit friends I grew up with in Adelaide and Perth. I want my son to see his godmother in Queensland and my daughter to see her godparents in Adelaide. We need to let the national plan continue to roll out.
Time has expired.